And we are back with the third segment of the GSMC Sports Podcast presented by the GSMC Sports Network. And in this third segment, we are going to be talking about some NFL news that's going around and some things that I really didn't get to cover in a couple of segments that I think I sort of should. And I wanted to cover this one yesterday. I've actually wanted to cover a lot of them yesterday, but I didn't really get the chance to do that, so I'm going to do that right now. And we're gonna start off with the Aaron Rodgers the thing that's going on with Aaron Rodgers, because I can't really I can't really give a word exactly what's going on with Aaron and the Jets right now. I mean, we all know that the season is a complete disaster class, but what really added on to the drama was this article that was released after it was actually before this weekend where the Jets ended up blowing the game. Hi, Anthony, in the chat. And so before the Jets ended up blowing the game to the Seahawks, there was an article going around that said that that claimed that Aaron Rodgers wanted to play in 2025, but he did not want to play for the Jets. And obviously that made a bunch of headlines. And Aaron Rodgers went on the Pat McAfee show, and he ended up telling Pat McAfee and the guys that are on the show that he has no idea how that story ended up getting out, because he has never said anything about playing next year, and he's never said that if he was going to play next year, it wouldn't be for the Jets. The Jets would be, apparently they would be the first option on who he would want to play for. And the sports writer who wrote about this also has a tendency of actually, from my knowledge at least, she has a tendency of somewhat taking sources and not giving those sources any credit, and trying to claim those sources as her own. So it's been, I noticed that there was an Instagram user who claimed that this same writer that's been spreading this fake news around about Aaron Rodgers and who he wants to play for next year was the same writer who ended up stealing some of his work. And obviously he the Instagram user does not like that, and completely supports Aaron Rodgers just calling this writer out. And this was just one of the instances where the writer, I believe the writer's name was Rossini, something like that. I know that was probably one of the last, either last name or a first name. I'm not entirely sure, but Rodgers answered saying, "I don't talk to that person in my circle, and my circle is really small. I don't have a relationship with reporters who are going to break stories like that. I haven't told anybody in my life that I want to play in 2025 and not on the Jets. That's 100% false, and I actually said the opposite." So this is this is just the sports writer just not knowing exactly what they're talking about. I was wrong for assuming that this is oh, there you go. Manzano's in the chat saying Diane Rossini. So I got the last name right, but again, not entirely sure what the first name was, but let's see. He also has some questions that I didn't even notice. Is it possible that Aaron Rodgers may be mentally refusing to admit that he doesn't have the arm strength and talent that he used to have? And also possibly switching up his game and using his brain a lot more and being able to read the field like you saw with Peyton when he got to Denver when his arm was gone after his back surgeries. I don't think his arm strength has gotten weaker. I genuinely don't. I think the Jets, they have way more problems on the team this season than Aaron Rodgers individually. And I don't really think all of these losses, while I will say that Aaron didn't really play well in some of these games, it's not like he ended up losing the game for the Jets either. There have been several miscues and mess ups from all of the positions on the Jets roster, whether it be the defense. I mean, we all know Sauce Gardner is not having nearly as good of a season as we thought he would have. There's also their kicker, who's been missing important field goals and important extra points that they ended up botching as well. And while Aaron was not perfect in a lot of these games, it's not like he was the only reason why they would lose a lot of these games. And it's not like he doesn't have a brain to make these plays and read defenses better. But again, when the offensive line is completely overwhelmed and doesn't give Aaron all that much protection, there's not really much that the quarterback can do. But again, like I said, Aaron is not perfect, and he's obviously had several games where he could have played a lot better and definitely played at a level that we expected him to, the same MVP caliber player from Green Bay, but that just hasn't happened yet. So I'm not going to act like Aaron Rodgers is completely null and void from these teams' issues. But so far, basically what this entire thing is that I don't know and no one knows what's going to happen to Aaron Rodgers after the season. So do not take how should I say this? Do not take what I said in that other segment with Aaron Rodgers talking about how he wants to be on a different team. Do not take that seriously at all. That was a report, and that was a false report, and that was my bad because, again, it's like I thought the sports writer was credible. I mean, why would they post that article if it wasn't credible on a very credible source? Did not make sense to me, so that's my bad. But Anthony's in the chat saying, no, I'm not blaming Aaron on the dysfunction of the Jets. That franchise has been dysfunctional the past 2 decades. I'm just saying him specifically as an older player or an athlete sometimes. They refuse to admit that they're past it. I mean, why would they want to admit that they're past it? Like, you can't admit that you don't have it when the season is still going on, because that ultimately gives the other teams more of an advantage when they're ready to play you. And it'll give them another more of a confidence booster. Granted, it's like, when you're playing the Jets, that's really the only confident booster that you need right now, but towards the beginning of the season, it's like you can't really give that away. So now we're going to move on to some other news in regards to the NFL right now, more focusing on the Niners than with the Jets, because honestly, like I can't even fathom the Jets. Anthony Manzano said, no, she is credible, but she doesn't really have any connections to Aaron to cooperate her reporting. Sure, she might be credible, but again, she does, at least according to an Instagram user that uncovered NFL. I really like that account. He claims that the writer ended up stealing some of his content and things like that he posts online. So, and did not give credit at all. So that's like why I was like, okay, maybe she's not all that credible as I thought. But again, that's neither here nor there. So for the Niners, they're suffering a little bit of a crisis, and I call that crisis the Madden curse, mainly because Christian McCaffrey, he's barely played many snaps in the season today, and in the season as of right now, excuse me. And ever since his return, he's been less than mediocre. Like, he has not been the same monster that we remembered from his first few years on San Fran and when he eventually got to San Fran, right? So the Niners, they're apparently placing both of their running backs, Christian McCaffrey and Jordan Mason, on injured reserve, meaning that they're both going to be out for at least 4 weeks. McCaffrey is going to be out at least 6 weeks with a PCL knee injury, meaning his season is most likely going to be over, barring a miraculous playoff run from the Niners. So it's like, I don't think the Niners are going to make the playoffs this year, especially with McCaffrey injured. And Jordan Mason, he's going to be out at least 4 weeks with a high ankle sprain that he suffered in last night's game. And this is incredibly unlucky coming in from the Niners, and the only way that I can really explain it is just calling it the Madden curse, because that's really what it is. It's like you really cannot make these injury woes up. It's like it's so unfortunate for the Niners. I mean, I'm kind of laughing on the inside, but again, this is very unfortunate for the Niners and their situation that they're in. It's really like, ugh. And Manzano's in the chat. With Brandon Ayuk, do you think this contract was a bad idea? Because it seems like once he got the money, he doesn't really want to perform. I mean, that's what it's looking like. Excuse me. That's what it's really looking like in this one. And it's I don't want to jump the gun and say it was bad just yet because like again, it might just be a little bit of a slump. We don't know. It might be a slump, but again, he's not really playing like he deserves all that money. That is for sure. Was the PCL injury that McCaffrey had a non-contact injury during a play, or was it contact to his plant leg? I'm pretty sure. I mean, it didn't say anything about a non-contact injury, but again, he was playing in the snow, so I didn't really watch the entirety of that game. I'm not even gonna lie. I watched only the highlights of that game. It was late. I had to go back to school, and I was incredibly tired on that Sunday. So I just decided to take the night off from watching football. Very rare thing that I do, but I'm actually going to go ahead and check real quick because I don't think it was a non-contact injury, but yeah, no, it wasn't. It wasn't a non-contact injury. He definitely, it wasn't, it, obviously it wasn't targeted, but it's like there was a play where it was a little bit rough and it obviously hurt him. So it was not a non-contact injury. It's not like he was trotting onto the field and just boop, there it goes. And now we're going into the final thing because I do have to wrap this up a little bit. The Bears firing their head coach, Matt Eberflus. Now, some people, they might not think this is a good idea to fire him now because of Caleb Williams and, giving Caleb Williams a completely new coach in the middle of the season. That's never a good thing for a young quarterback, constantly switching around between coaches and coaches. It's not a good thing. And the reason why Eberflus was fired was mainly because of the last game, where there was absolutely terrible clock management on Thanksgiving. I mean, the Bears, they had one timeout left and they refused to use it. And they could have probably won the game or at the very least sent it into overtime. But for some reason, the coach just refused to call a timeout. And he thought it was a good decision, which ultimately ended his career with the Bears. That's really all it was. And I mean, in the last 6 games that the Bears have played, they've lost all 6 of those games, and they lost 3 of those games, 3 back to consecutive games actually, by 1 scores to NFC North opponents, right? And he became the first head coach in team history to be fired in the middle of a season, which is not a very good thing to be remembered, obviously. And it's one of the big reasons for him getting fired was because of the not just that Lions game where they managed the clock horribly, but also because he has a 5-19 record in 1-score games, which is the worst in NFL history among coaches with at least 20 games under their belts, right? He just cannot close out games. And obviously, you do not want a coach that has no idea how to close out games. It's like Doc Rivers in the playoffs. You do not want that coach in the playoffs. And it's Warren acknowledged on Monday that it wasn't an easy decision to fire Eberflus, but conceded that it was the right time and that having interim head coach Thomas Brown in the building helped convince the leadership team that a transition was needed. So obviously, this was a long time coming. I did not like the Bears head coach at all. He might have been a big reason why Justin Fields wasn't as good as people expected him to be. But yeah, that's all that I really have to say in this segment. I'll answer the final questions before I go on to break. I don't really pay attention to that type of stuff. Can you explain to me the difference between Can you explain to me the difference between non-contact injury and just a standard injury in terms of the same injury, such as a PCL? So, non-contact injury is exactly what it sounds like. It's literally just a play where you did not get touched at all, but something pops or something gets dislocated because you had an awkward position because of the turf, something like that. It's like how should I say this? So like imagine you're lifting weights, right? This actually happened to a friend of mine once. So imagine you're lifting weights, right? And out of nowhere you hear a pop. That's a non-contact injury right there. It's literally just random plays where you don't expect there to be a pop, but there's just a pop in your leg or there's a pop in your arm, something like that. Something happens and it feels weird. That's essentially what that is. It's like it's not something that you can really, it's bad luck more or less. It's not something that players can really control because it's like, again, they're just going through a similar motion, but maybe one tiny thing is off in that motion and that ultimately snaps their leg or something like that. That's usually what a non-contact injury is. Like there are instances where some players in the NFL, they're running, right? They're running and like everything's fine, but then like I don't know, they pull a hamstring or something like that just by running, and then they're out for a couple of weeks. That's essentially what a non-contact injury is, where it's like, you're running, you're doing your thing, and it's like, ow, what the heck was that? That's what that is. With how well he is doing now as an offensive coordinator for Washington, is it possible you can see the Bears hiring Cliff Kingsbury as the next head coach? I don't know about that, but that is actually a very interesting take. That is definitely one for development. And the final question before I go into the break. So basically a freak injury like a baseball player tearing their ACL during a home plate celebration. Something like, yes, exactly like that actually. It's literally the definition of a non-contact injury, because it's like it just happens completely out of nowhere and you don't really expect it to happen like that. Now, it's literally just like I can't really think of any recent players to my knowledge that have suffered a non-contact injury that's like a really good example, but I'll think of one eventually. But I have to go into this break and get into the fourth segment because we are going to be talking about Bryce Young and his resurgence into the NFL starting lineup with the Panthers. So I'll be right back after the short break. Be sure to stay tuned.
For the best and latest podcasts available anywhere, go to the podcast app on your cell phone and type in GSMC to access free content-rich podcasts on health and wellness, book reviews, sports, entertainment, relationships, social media, movies, technology, finance, and even weird news. Subscribe and download the GSMC Podcast Network's family of shows, available everywhere podcasts are found.